Hey guys, Woodruff here. So I've been having a lot of people reach out and ask questions about hemodynamics, how to make it simpler. And yeah, I'll start out by saying this is that there is no such thing as simple hemodynamics because it's a concept versus something like learning a disease process. So it can be a little challenging, but I'm going to try to at least break it down in a simpler way, a little bit more. Now, this is not all you need to know, and I'm not going to get into numbers and other stuff, but if you're just really struggling with the basics of just even wrapping your brain around it, this might be the video for you. Let's see if I can get it for There we go. So this is how to think of it. Think of hemodynamics, or why we're making you study this, is that this is all the things that affect your body, organs, and tissues from getting oxygen. So it all comes down to your ability to get oxygen. And the three main components that you usually look at around hemodynamics are your fluid status, your heart status, and your vessel status. And I kind of have the hemodynamics related to each of those. And we're going to go through each one of these. So in other words, in order to know how much oxygen my tissues and body, organs, everything's going to get, it depends on how much fluid I have or don't have. My heart's ability to squeeze, and then how constricted or not constricted my vessels are. So first thing we want to consider is fluid status. And really, there's two ends of the spectrum here. So first, the fluid status could be that I'm overloaded. I have too much fluids or too many fluids. There we go. And for this, the patient's going to have a CVP, or like if you're getting confused, there's CVP, there's preload, they're the same thing. Or there's also PAWP, or you might see the PAD. All of those are measures of fluid. And so instead of looking at them, I know there's a lot of acronyms, it's hard. Flashcards can help sometimes just to get the general gist and to memorize the numbers. But when you're looking at this, you want to think about, this is telling me how much fluid I have on board. If the number is high, it's a sign that you're overloaded. So if my CVP, if you have a test question, my CVP is high, the preload is high, the PAWP is high, the PAD is high, that means you have too much fluid. So I think for me, for hemodynamics, it helps me to think practically, like, what does this tell me about the patient versus, just trying to memorize numbers. You have to think about it in actual situations. And then on the other end, if the CVP or the preload is low, if the PAWP, PAD, all that stuff is low, it's a sign that you're empty or low on fluids. In other words, you're dehydrated. You don't have a lot of fluid in your vascular space. And so this is going to affect your ability to get oxygen to your tissues. Because think of, your blood vessels like a river. If there's no water, like, sometimes I live in Texas, and, if you're here with me too, it gets dry sometimes. So you drive by those creeks and they're really dry. And so if they're dry, there's nothing flowing through those creeks because they are all dried up. And it's the same for a person. If they're all dried up, there's no, well, obviously there's not no flow. So don't think of necessarily like a completely dried out lake. But if there's less fluid that's coming back to the heart, there's going to be less fluid that go out to the rest of the body to bring my tissues oxygen. So, and then with being overloaded, if it's high, that seems like, hey, that'd be a good thing. I want lots and lots of fluid, but then my heart can get overwhelmed. It can become a little much. So I know it seems like fluid is a good thing, and we do want a certain extent, but with fluid, it's a balance. We want enough, but not too much. And if you're getting confused by the CVP versus PAWP, the easiest thing I can tell you is that CVP tells us how much is coming back to the heart from the rest of the body, how much fluid like I'm starting out with. So this is that's why we usually go by CVP when it comes to looking at how someone's fluid status is going, because it's really simple. Not even simple. It's a lot easier to measure. Like, we don't have to do it as invasive of things to measure CVP. And then also because it gives us an idea of what do we have left over after all my blood flows through my body. What do I have left going back to my heart? Shows me what I'm starting with before it enters my heart. The PAWP is helpful too. It is, like I said, you have to have a more invasive line to get this, but it tells me how much fluid I have on the left side of my heart. So think my left ventricle, how much fluid is in there that's about to be pumped out to the rest of my body. So those, the CVP and PAWP are the same thing. The PAD, think anything that has a P in it, it goes for the left side of the heart. The C is central, it's going to be on the right side of the heart. So then the next thing we look at after we determine like fluid status, then we need to know the heart status. So how is the muscle of my heart doing? Is it weak and impaired? Is it having trouble squeezing? And if my contractility is low, then no matter how much fluid I have a problem. If I don't have enough fluid and then also don't have, a good heart squeeze, then nothing's moving forward. But if I have a lot of fluid too, it can be an issue. And then if my heart's not squeezing well, then that fluid's getting stuck and backing up. But as a whole, think of this as, what do you call it? I was gonna say I think the best example I like is the water bottle example. So like if you squeeze a water bottle with 2 fingers, I don't have a water bottle. I do have a cup here. I don't think there's anything in it. So I don't like to splash myself. So if I just do like a little squeeze for this, and I had this a full cup, only a little bit's gonna come out. But if I give a full like crush like this, a whole lot more can come out. I might have broken this cup with. Okay. Anyway, depending on how strong of a squeeze my heart has, that's how much more stuff like blood is going to move forward, which can therefore oxygenate my tissues. So we have fluid. How much fluid we have can affect how much blood we're getting out. Then the muscle of my heart, how well it's squeezing, can affect how much blood and therefore oxygen I can get out to my tissues. And then the last thing we look at is the vessel status. So we kind of have the stuff before the heart, which is like how much blood is coming back. Then we have in the heart, which is how much squeeze it has. And then after the heart, this is telling us, how well, how much resistance the heart has to fight against to get that blood moving forward. Because even if I have perfect volume status, I have a great squeezing heart. If I have a tiny, tiny narrow vessel that my heart has to fight against, or a really, really open vessel that maybe doesn't have to fight that resistance, but there's no squeeze to get it moving forward, there can be a problem getting blood moving forward. So think of this if the difference, the example I gave someone else, you know who you are, earlier was, if you're out at a restaurant and you're drinking from a straw, you're going to be able to get fluid out into that straw, whatever you're drinking, but it's going to take more time. I don't know if you've ever tried to drink a mojito with one of those little straws, but sometimes things can get stuck in it. It's a narrow straw, and it can get a little rough sometimes. So you always want to think about imagine of course you can still get fluid out, but there's more resistance. Now take that difference between drinking with a straw versus if I just grab a cup and drink straight from it, there's no resistance. Easy, I can drink it down really quickly. And so as a whole, what this is looking at is after the heart, the blood vessels after the heart, which would be like your aorta, stuff like that. How narrow are they? Are my vasoconstricted? Do I have narrow vessels? Are they very open and wide, which means I'm vasodilated? Because this is going to tell how well I can pump blood forward. Because again, even if everything else is normal, if I have a lot of resistance, or if I am so wide open, which sounds like a good thing, you have to have some resistance to get blood pumping forward, then this is going to be a problem. So this is really measuring resistance in the blood vessels. So we have fluid can be an issue. We have the muscle of the heart can be an issue, and the blood vessels after the heart can be an issue. And so if there's high resistance, the measure we look at is what's called SVR, systemic vascular resistance. That number is going to be high. This tells me I am vasoconstricted. I'm drinking out of that narrow straw and my vessels are narrow. So there's going to be more resistance. It's going to be hard to get things moving forward. And then on the other end, we also, kind of like with fluid, we don't want it too high and too low. We also don't want low resistance. You think low resistance would be good because, yeah, just push it forward. But this is kind of like the whole concept of getting blood back to the heart requires your veins in your legs to push blood up. Now, if I got in a hot tub and drank some alcohol, those blood vessels would be wide open and chilling. I've actually had this experience, and blood can't flow back up to your brain, and you usually pass out. It's a really defining moment. So the same thing can happen that if there's, if the blood vessels after the heart are super open, super dilated, then you can have an issue where the blood doesn't have enough squeeze to get pushed forward as easily. So what happens when you think vasodilation, think blood pooling. It's more of a blood pooling issue. So in this, the SVR is going to be low. So there's low resistance. My vessels are open wide, but it also can cause a problem where there is, a not good perfusion to my body because then the blood's pooling. So in a vessel problem, if it's too high, I'm not getting blood out because it's too narrow and it takes more time and effort. And it can also strain the heart, has to work super hard to get that blood out. But if there's low resistance, then blood can pool. And then there's also an issue of getting that tissue perfusion. So everything comes back to, am I getting oxygen? So when you're looking, I'm going to throw a case study out here. That's a shot case study. And if you look really to study hemodynamics, you have to look at situations. And for each of these things, okay, if it's high, what do I need to do? If it's low, what do I need to do? What does it tell me about the patient? So really you want to know what's the normal for it. What would cause it to be high or low for each of these hemodynamics? Like think of what kind of patients would have a high CVP or a low CVP, et cetera. And then what is the patient going to look like? Is there any other symptoms that are going to come with it? Or, how are you going to know aside from this number that maybe they have this problem? And there's not always, something to show. Most of them, it's just going to be like, hey, they're not getting good perfusion. But for some of them, like the fluid ones, you might see signs of like fluid overload or dehydration, stuff like that. And then the last question you want to ask yourself is, what am I going to do about it? So know the normals. And that's why I'm not bringing them up, because every textbook is different. Know the normals. Know what kind of patients are going to have high or low of these numbers. Know if there's going to be any specific like assessment findings associated with each. And then also connect what treatment. So like, for example, if I have a high CVP, I have too much fluid, so I need to get it that fluid off. And so I'm going to do the double Ds, diuretics or dialysis stuff to try to decrease that fluid, or drain I should say triple Ds, because you can also drain the fluid depending on where it is. Or like vessel status issues. If I have low resistance, I'm vasodilated, what I need to do is constrict. So we might use something like vasopressors. So this is kind of like a little bit of a puzzle, but if you start doing it in situations, it starts making more sense. But it's not something you can just study and it should make sense like that. Until you see it in a situation, it starts making more sense. But anyway, hopefully I didn't just repeat myself again. I might have in this video because I don't remember what I said in the other ones, but if nothing else, sometimes hearing the same thing, but with a different time, maybe a few different examples. I don't think I talked about mojitos in my last one, but you know what I'm talking about, right? When you're drinking like a mojito, and is it like the mint leaves get stuck and you're like, damn, I'm just trying to drink my mojito. But yeah, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, hope you guys are doing well. See you for the next one.